Hello class, this is Dr. DeRosier and I am here to talk about revising and editing, two important steps of the writing process. Now, if you remember correctly from my previous lectures, the writing process has 5 steps, and so this lecture is going to cover 2 of those. These are the nearly the last steps of the writing process. Revising comes first, then editing in this process. But you might ask, what is the difference between revising and editing? Well, let me tell you. Revising is a major reorganization of ideas. It is taking a fresh approach, so you're completely looking at this information with a new eye, and during this process you may omit or add material. Think of it like you have a house and you are rebuilding your house in a major way. You're adding a room, you're removing a room, you are adding a garage, a whole new part of your house. So these are major changes to the way the writing is going. Now, editing, on the other hand, is like a minor remodeling project. Maybe you're putting up some wallpaper. Maybe you're changing the lighting. So things like grammar, spelling, and syntax corrections are done at this phase. Checking word choices and punctuation. Checking for style problems, like maybe it just doesn't sound good in that order. So that is the difference between revising and editing. First you're going to do revision, then you're going to do editing. Let me give you some examples so that you can maybe understand a little better about these differences. For example, in revising, you might change a whole paragraph from passive to active voice. Some of you are struggling with that a little. That's not a major problem for you as a whole in this class. The next thing you might do, another example, is you might reorganize your whole paper to provide a single, clear, overarching structure to your paper. So maybe it's just kind of all over the place. Your ideas aren't connected. So you might reorganize so that it's clearly seen what you're trying to accomplish in your paper. Additionally, in revision, you might refine a thesis statement. You're going to be writing a thesis statement. You've done some readings on that. And you would possibly even supply new evidence to support it. Because possibly, and this happens sometimes, during your research you realize your thesis statement is way off. So at that point you might have to refine your initial hypothesis, and you may have to add new evidence to support or refute it. And that's probably happening because of the evidence you've already found. So it's not really extra work, it's just changing to better align with what you have found. Another example of revision is improving the argument. You might introduce opposing evidence. It's important that you present challenging evidence, things that go against your hypothesis, in order that you can refute it. So you don't just introduce it and leave it there, which I have seen on multiple occasions. You would introduce it and then you would say, but based on this other evidence, that's not necessarily a good point. So you would go ahead and introduce an opposing argument, but then you would refute it. So if you improve your argument by doing those things, maybe one or both of those things, that would be an example of revision. You also might move your writing up the cognitive ladder. You might add additional paragraphs to support it with evidence to fill space that you recently you maybe had to take out some information. So think about that. If you take something out and you have a 5-page paper, you're not 5 pages anymore. So you need to make sure if you take out some paragraphs that you're adding something back into that. Let me give you, on the other hand, some examples of editing. Editing is like you see a needless words and you take them out. So you might correct spelling, or if something's awkwardly phrased, you might correct that. You might change punctuation or make it the same throughout. An example would be sometimes you can, in a series, you can use a comma after the second word in a 3-part series or you cannot use a comma in a second word of a 3-word series. But you need to be consistent throughout your paper, whichever way you choose, even though they're both correct. You don't want to have different ways of doing that in your paper. Even though both ways are correct, it's not consistent, and you want to be consistent in your writing. So that's an example of standardizing punctuation. You may move sentences or paragraphs, but you're not changing what they say. You're just moving them to a different order. You might add or improve a transition, to make something connect better. You may convert a paragraph to a bulleted list. More likely, if you're using APA, you're going to take out a bulleted list because bulleted lists are not necessarily APA. You don't put a bulleted list there. So these are some examples. I hope that helps to refine and clarify the difference between revision and editing. But I want you to be clear on it because it's important, because there are 2 steps and you're going to do both of them. You're going to revise first, then you're going to edit. I would also like to say that in your feedback, you all did really well on your last feedback assignments. But it's important in your feedback that you offer information on both revisions that you're suggesting and editing. And you did that in your feedback last time. But you might say something, I might see something like correct the spelling, or, sometimes your transitions aren't good here. I don't really know what that means, or this is phrased awkwardly. I don't really understand it. So I saw some of those editing examples, and I also saw some of you saying this is missing a point that's very important, or you need to add in this. So those are revision examples. So I saw you doing it, so I'm really not too concerned that you're not, but I just want to throw it out. But why would you do these extra steps anyway? Because first of all, they're not extra steps, but there is actually a benefit to doing it. If you revise and edit, you're going to improve the quality of your work. And what does that do? That assists your social work clients through increased writing quality. If you improve the quality of your writing, you're going to do, I just thought these up in about 1 minute, get more grants for your client services. I think in a previous video I stated this, but you do get more money for your grant if it's in the top tier of grants. So if you get a certain grade, for example, on your peer review of your grant, you get more money. So that's going to let you provide more client services. It will help you write better reports and letters to judges on behalf of your clients. That is going to assist your clients. If you're able to be clear to the judge, and I actually have an example. My supervisee recently wrote a letter to the judge and got her family, got their kids back that she was working with. And they're going to start moving toward reunification and having more visits. That's because she wrote a clear letter. The judge even said, I understand what you're saying. This is great. Thank you for sharing that. If she had made her letter unclear, which was the case with the previous therapist, the judge would say, throw it out and say, you need a new therapist. We're going to start this process again. And that keeps a child out of the home. This recently just happened this week with my supervisee. Additionally, you can provide information about new effective treatments that you develop as a social worker. I know that sounds really scary, but you will figure out things that work better for clients, and you will be able to provide information about that. If you write well, you need to be able to write well enough that people understand what you're saying. So revising and editing is part of making your writing better, so that people understand. Another way you can assist clients is through developing better advocacy and policy resources for client groups. A lot of times you'll do you'll notify a group or clients about a particular law that's coming up that you want them to call in. Well, they may keep a law from being passed or help a law pass if enough people write to their legislators. But if you're not clear in your writing, if you haven't revised and edited and there's lots of grammatical errors and it doesn't really make sense what you're saying and you haven't covered the main points because you didn't revise well then nobody's going to even know what you're asking them to do. So those things are all important. And so you can see, and those are just a few things I thought of in like 60 seconds and typed on here. There are multitude of ways that improving the quality of your writing through revision and editing is going to help clients. So I want you to keep that in mind as you're going through your revision process and your editing process. Lastly, and probably most important to you all in this class, it's going to improve your grade. If you revise and edit, and in any class in the MSW program, if you revise and edit, you're going to improve the quality of your work to such a point that you will get a better grade. Like I've said this before, many students I know are turning in a draft to me. They haven't revised it, they haven't edited it, no one has assisted them in a peer review process, and they are turning into me the first draft. But you're not going to do that to me here. That's why you're going to get a really good grade on your final paper. You are going to have revisions and edits. You're going to have a peer review from me, you're going to have a peer review from another student, and you're going to take that feedback, what people have suggested to you, you're going to critically think about it, and you're going to improve your writing by using that feedback. So you're going to be very lucky in this class. A lot of classes you don't get that opportunity, but in this class you do. And I suggest you seek out for yourself opportunities, even if no one else looks at it. You know, there is a writing center here on campus. They will look it over for you. There are other students who are dedicated to improving the quality of their writing. I'm sure they would be happy to trade off with you if you're good at revising and editing. And based on what I saw in your peer reviews, you all are fairly decent at this. You've given some really excellent reviews. So that's all I have to say about revising and editing. I hope I have convinced you that this is these are two very important steps in the writing process. And hopefully this will help you improve your work with me. I'll see you again for one more lecture.